Welcome to Ask an Atheist. I'm Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Amit Pal,
and
FFRF.
We're waiting for the teleprompter to come on, but in the meantime, Amit, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, a number of things. This is truly international. First, we start with Dan. Domestically, in Salt Lake City and other places, he's actually where we play the game, Where in the World is Dan Barker? And Dan and you actually were way away from the United States just recently, so we'll talk about that in very Catholic and very religious Poland.
And then we have a real treat for everybody because we have a little teaser interview with Daniel C Dennett, the very eminent philosopher who wrote Breaking the Spell. And he was here last week because we were so privileged to have him right here in Free Thought Hall in Madison, Wisconsin, yes.
and meet all of us at FFRF met him, and Dan and you interviewed him.
Yes, we interviewed him for Free Thought Matters, but then I also did a short interview just for those of you watching Ask an Atheist, and our videographer, producer, Bruce Johnson, who's behind the scenes here in the studio, drove all the way to La Crosse to do a recording about Dan Dennett. This is a special oratorio.
And the result is a bunch of winners that win that competition.
And this is just Dan Dennett, his words, and then there's an orchestra behind him, and it's kind of like Scott Johnson, the composer's answer to Handel's Messiah. So that's just a little teaser of what's coming up. And but so first we want to find out where Dan is. Where in the world is Dan Barker? A little close there, Dan.
Oops.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, but we can't see you. We're seeing your neck.
I know, because there's a fire alarm in the Sky Lounge. Just when you started, the fire alarm went off, and they're telling all of us to exit the lounge where I'm all set up.
Why didn't we come back to you then?
Yeah, why don't you come back? Because there's no way to do that with that fire alarm going off, and so I'll. So you guys wing it for a while, and then I'll come back in as soon as I can.
Certainly.
So what we'll do is we'll do the Dan Dennett interview and this wonderful oratorio.
Sure.
We'll go to that, and then we'll come back to Dan and hopefully talk with Dan about our trip to Poland for the Days of Atheism, which was amazing at the end of March. So let's look at that clip about Daniel Dennett. What brings you to Wisconsin?
Well, there's a performance of a piece called Mind Out of Matter, which was composed by a wonderful New York City composer named Scott Johnson, who's actually from Wisconsin originally. And it takes my recorded voice, some talks that I've given, and it uses them, tape recorded and repeated and echoed and then turned into music with a very interesting group of modern musicians, a group called Alarm Will Sound, that astonishingly cohesive and very talented group. And this will be the fourth or fifth performance of this, premiered in New Jersey at the Montclair State Peak Performances, then at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, then once at Tufts, and I think there's one other performance out west somewhere, can't remember, and then this one. A cow without a human being is like a beaver without a dam. It's like a spider without a web. Cows are after all, cows are after all, a domesticated species. Well, suppose we ask the question, who designed this cow? Who designed this cow? Who designed this cow? Who designed this cow? Although it's been recently designed and redesigned and redesigned, designed and redesigned and redesigned, designed and redesigned and redesigned, designed and redesigned and redesigned by professional cow designers, cattle breeders. Before that, it was a wild species. Domestic cattle were descended from the aurochs, a wild bovine. Who designed the aurochs? Who designed the aurochs? Nobody. Nobody. Evolution by natural selection design. Evolution by natural selection design, the aurochs. And what aurochs were for making more aurochs. And that's all they were for. And that's all they were for. It's a combination of orchestra and recorded material. And it's all woven together very tightly.
Well, you have
but I don't have to perform. I've done all my work, but my voice is turned into music by Scott Johnson.
Well, you have a very good baritone there
well,
for them to work with.
As it turns out, after we got going on this project, and it's very hard to hear tones in speaking voice, in speaking voice, in speaking voice, in speaking voice. If you listen long enough, you begin to you can get the tones. Well, so he went through it all and he found the tonal contours, and then he writes music for the instruments that emphasize that.
So the music's playing as you are talking.
That's right.
Making it like
oh
a
yeah,
song.
I mean it's all woven together. My voice is just sort of one instrument in this orchestra, but you can follow. I mean, the voice, all the words you can follow, and it makes sense, if I may say so.
And what is it about?
It's about the evolution of religion and the evolution of consciousness. So it's about Darwin and evolution and consciousness and religion. It's about my topics, and all in my own words. As faithfully recorded on public occasions, and then he weaves them into these, well, it's a 90-minute oratorio. Wow. It's an atheist oratorio, you might say.
You have inspired an oratorio.
I know, it's thrilling. And the reason I came out to Lawrence was, first of all, I just love to hear it and watch the musicians do it. And I thought, okay, I'll come out and I'll give a talk the day before, and then that gave me time to visit you here in Madison.
That's right, and we pre-recorded a Free Thought Matters TV show, in which we talked a little bit about another play that you really have inspired. That's hopefully going to be off Broadway perhaps this year. And what is that?
This is a play that now has the title Adam Man Paren, not his real name, close paren. And it's the story of a number of clergy who lost their faith and stayed in the pulpit. And Linda Lascola interviewed them in a project that she and I ran, Tufts University research project, interviewed them under conditions of complete secrecy and confidentiality. A lot of them still are preaching away in their pulpits, but they're participants in this study. And the play is very moving because they're pouring out their heart to Linda. And first of all, the play is essentially all taken verbatim from the transcripts of her interviews. So these are real words of real people in real problems, and they're very moving.
So Linda's portrayed on stage, interviewing each of these clergy.
Linda's portrayed on stage, as it were. She's not the star of the play, but she's the interlocutor, the prober, and the individual actors that play the different roles, and some of them, in effect, play several roles at once. And there's some singing in it. The performance has been through a number of different versions, and we had a wonderful workshop at Princeton in the drama department for 2 weeks in January, which led to performances right at the end of January. The group is the Civilians. It's a New York City-based sort of documentary theater company. The director is Steve Cosson, who's simply brilliant.
Sounds perfect.
Oh, well, we're so thrilled because he and the performers really got it, and the esprit de corps during and immediately after the Saturday performance, the last performance at the workshop, I was just thrilled to be there to see how this thing is coming to fruition. So now we have to get it off Broadway, and we're busy looking for supporters and lining up set designers and theaters and supporters. We need some angels, some real-world naturalistic, non-mysterious angels to come up and become investors in the play.
Well, I can't wait to see it. And I bet when you went into a career in ethics and philosophy that you never realized you're going to inspire all of this art.
No, it's been an unexpected, unanticipated side benefit to have both some music and some theater. I'm not a character in the play. Linda is the main character, and that's as it should be.
But in the production, and what's it called?
Adam Man, not his real name.
But the production with you, the oratorio.
Oh, that's called Mind Out of Matter.
Mind Out of Matter. There you really are the main character.
Yeah, I guess I am, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Ask an Atheist.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it very much, Annie, Laurie.
So that was fun. And if you are interested in seeing a longer interview of him, we will be airing that on Free Thought Matters in 11 cities starting in the fall, and it will go up on YouTube in the fall. So you can get better acquainted with this very eminent but very down-to-earth iconic figure in atheism in the United States, Daniel C Dennett.
Look forward to seeing it. I really loved meeting him, but I wasn't sitting in when the interview was conducted, so I really look forward to seeing it, and I'm sure our viewers will too.
And now I'm understanding that we're connecting again with Dan. This is part of the joy of Facebook Live and Skyping. Hi, Dan.
Hi. So as soon as the show started, the alarm went off in the Sky Lounge. I found this quiet corner back here where they said it was quiet, and then bang, we all had to exit, and then we just got back in again.
So where are you?
So I'm in the airport at Salt Lake City. And last night I was up in Logan, Utah, where I did a debate. There it is on the map. And then I traveled this morning. It's snowing up there. I traveled through a snowstorm down to Salt Lake City, and then I'm going to fly to Atlanta today, and then down to Huntsville, Alabama, and then going up to Florence, Alabama tomorrow night for a debate. So, boy, that looks like a little worm going up there. Anyways, Florence is the University of Northern Alabama for debate number 135.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, those are pretty cool graphics from Bruce Johnson, our video producer. So, way to go. Bruce
likes to show off his creative talents there.
So Dan, since you've been spending time in Utah, there's a joke that you may or may not have heard that the distance between state and church in Utah is half a mile. And that's because, I mean, if you have spent any time in downtown Salt Lake City, you'll know that literally the distance between the State House and the Mormon headquarters is half a mile or so.
It is a half a mile.
It's a very pretty downtown, but that's the problem in Utah, that, that Mormonism has so much of a hold, so much of a control over state issues.
Well, almost all of the students that I met yesterday at the USU, Utah State University, almost all of them were ex-Mormons.
Wow.
So, and Logan is way up north, up by the Idaho border, so it's Mormon territory. And they were really cute. They were a lot of fun. We had a huge crowd. We had about 300 people who came to this live-streamed debate with a local pastor. And it was the InterVarsity group, which is Christian. It was Ratio Christi, and then the Secular Student Alliance. And they got along cordially, and it was a very, very exciting event. So that was fun.
And don't you have a cartoon?
Yes. So Dan, the time I was there in Salt Lake City was because there was an editorialists convention, and Pat Bagley, who's still, I believe, the cartoonist for the Salt Lake City paper, the Tribune,
he still is, yes.
Actually had a presentation for us, and this was around 2010. So Mitt Romney, surprise, surprise, was very much in the news, and he presented all of us, which was great of him, with a collection of his cartoons. And here are a couple of cartoons about Mitt Romney. Just remember, looking back to 2008 or so, people will see that no matter how much he tried to fit in, and Romney is trying to demonize Muslims, and yet the Republican base thinks of him as an apostate or a heretic because of his Mormon background, and here he is trying to sort of be the inverse of JFK. You know, JFK, of course, and we use that in our ads, said about church and state, that, you know, there needs to be a separation. And Romney, of course, was trying to be completely the opposite. And yet, as you can see in the cartoon on the left-hand side, you know, what the result is, that, you know, Christians didn't fully accept him or embrace him. And it was one of the reasons that maybe he lost the elections, because even the Christian base didn't stand with him, unlike Trump, who they're so eager and willing to embrace.
Yeah. Well, I think there's hope for Utah after meeting these students,
sure,
these secular students who are unashamed, unabashed, and very proud of. Actually, some of them are kind of kicked off from their families. And one student told me he left the faith. He's on his own financially now, so he's got to raise his own school money. But he says, I'd rather do that than pretend.
Well, he should be sure to enter our essay competition. We have 5 now, including one for ongoing college students. So I hope you told him about that. And anybody listening who's a student can go to FFRF.org and look under our events. There's a outreach, and there's a drop down just for student essay contests. So.
Dan, did you have a chance to roam around downtown Salt Lake City at all? The reason I ask is because when I did, as I said, it was pleasant otherwise, but I was accosted a couple of times by, let's say, Mormon preachers or lay missionaries who came up to me and tried to convince me to visit the temple or whatever, and sort of accept the Mormon faith, which I've never had that experience elsewhere in the country. So that was quite unique.
That's their whole shtick.
Certainly.
Well, so speaking of religiosity, Dan and I just came back from Poland, and we came back from an amazing event called the Days of Atheism 2019, an international conference. It was March 27th and 29th, I think. And we were very honored because they gave us an award. And I think if we're ready to see that, it says Atheist of the Year, Freedom from Religion Foundation. It's very pretty. It's glass. Can you close up on that? We won the organizational annual award, and that was very kind of them. And there were, I think what we've got are photographs, and we're going to, if you can put the photographs up, we'll give you some commentary.
I must say, Laurie, I was slightly sort of worried for you all, because Poland, of course, is a heavily Catholic country, extremely Catholic, and unfortunately, the government is very Christian nationalist.
Yes.
And, I was thinking, there's be a teeny weeny chance that, somebody would disrupt the conference, but certainly having an atheism conference in Warsaw under the current government, and it's part of this whole global religious nationalist kind of movement, Hungary, Poland, the United States, India, Brazil, and it's really worrisome. But of course, Poland is part of that too.
We were fine.
Yes.
And I don't know if you just saw that picture. I don't know if we can put that up again. We had people from, I think there were 18 European nations.
Wow.
2 from Africa, 2 from North America, 2 from South America. And there were panels where they were all participating, and there was a kind of Polish to American translation. So you can see how many people, those are just the people who came to the dinner. So I think there are about 200 people there. And that is Nina Sankari, who is the director of the Kazimierz Wazensky Foundation, which is their atheist foundation. And that's a picture of Dan and Nina and me and Jared Dunn, who we've interviewed on Free Thought Radio and Free Thought Matters.
Exactly.
And he came to play Chopin, of course, in Warsaw. And Jared is a member of FFRF and an atheist, and he gave an exquisite concert on a Steinway grand piano, but he also took Dan and me to see the Chopin Museum there, and he began the concert by explaining that Chopin was very unorthodox by the end of his life about religion. So a little bit of a kindred non-spirit there.
And did the local group tell you how it is operating in such a Catholic and such a right-wing conservative environment?
I didn't learn all that much about it, but they're a bona fide group.
Sure, that's
that
nice.
last picture, if we can get that back up again, is the palace where Jared gave a concert, and so did Dan. Like, both of them wonderful concerts.
And you can see Annie Laurie's in that picture. You can't zoom in, can you, Bruce? Oh yeah, there she is. There's Annie Laurie dressed up like a handmaid. Yeah,
we'll get to that. So we were in very beautiful buildings in downtown Warsaw, historic buildings. So they had access. They're a bona fide atheist group given access.
Nice.
So they're not persecuted at this point. And I was asked to talk about women in religion, and on the screen there is Ernestine L. Rose, who was born in Poland in 1810. And I asked the people in the room, how many of them, and there were a lot of feminists, how many of you have heard of Ernestine L. Rose? And only one hand raised, that was Nina's. But in her day in the United States, she was as famous as Gloria Steinem.
Wow.
And she's forgotten in Poland, she's forgotten in the United States, but she came to the United States in 1836 in time to become the first canvasser for women's rights. Huh. She actually went door to door asking women to sign a petition in support of the Married Women's Property Act that had been introduced by a free-thinking judge in the New York legislature, and he was being a laughingstock until she came along. And it took 12 years, but women passed that very landmark piece of legislation. And she was an out atheist. She was extremely well-known, vilified by the clergy, beloved by the free-thinking community and feminists. So that was my contribution to the event in part. And I also talked about the symbol from the 19th century of free thought, which is the pansy.
Of course.
Because it comes from the Latin or the French for thought, pensée, because pansies have what look like little faces. And Warsaw, and when we were Krakow, were absolutely filled with beautifully landscaped pansies everywhere we went. But we handed out our little pansy pin that says Freethinker to many of the women at the conference there. And Dan, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so I took this photo. Some of the women dressed up like the handmaid protesting patriarchy. And Annie Laurie, you are one of those. You're the second one from the right there, dressed up very, very demurely. And Armin Navabi is holding up one of the signs there. And this was a march from that palace all the way down to the castle area, through the streets of Warsaw, protesting the church, but also promoting atheism. And at the end of this march, I think we're at the beginning here. At the end of the march is where they reenacted the killing of execution of Kazimierz Wyszynski.
We'll wait for the pictures to tell us here. First, let's talk about the march. This was at what's the name of that square, Dan? Honoring
Copernicus.
Copernicus, thank you. And you can't really read that balloon. Of course, it's in Polish, but translated, that balloon says Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Nice.
There were black, white, and yellow balloons, huge numbers of these balloons all over downtown Poland. So that was kind of cool. And here there were a lot of protest pictures of this particular cardinal, I believe, who has not been tried formally, but is being accused of pedophilia. And there's now a growing movement against this scandal in Poland, but Poland is maybe 20 years behind the United States in terms of any justice. And we don't have too much justice in this country. So there were a lot of protesters there holding that poster. There was a woman in a wheelchair. And in the background, you can see there's a woman being put on a crucifix with her mouth muzzled to show that problem in Poland is abortion is illegal. And there are about 1,500 legal abortions and supposedly about over 100,000 illegal.
Wow.
And again, I didn't learn a whole lot about that situation, but it's bad. There's more of us protesters, and I think we have some photos. Here's a photo of the actors, and the whole point of this parade or this march was that it took place on the 330th day anniversary of the brutal execution of Kazimierz Wyszynski, who was a nobleman, and he's shown in the middle as a prisoner, and then these are actors, including the executioner. And he wrote a treatise about atheism, and he was put on trial both by the church and by the secular prosecution. And he was also excommunicated, and he was found guilty, and they executed him. And so they reenact this execution on the anniversary of his death on pertinent anniversaries, including the 330th. So you can see some of the crowd. We had marched about a mile, and all the tourists and bystanders were very polite and interested. And here's the guy portraying the cardinal. And of course, we didn't understand all this, but they were reading the actual words of the executioners. And this is just from my cell phone. And there's the actor getting ready to be executed. They forgot their prop. They had a head. So this is not completely authentically, but there he goes. And so they did this with a light touch, but it was really horrific. They said that we're going to cut off your hands because those hands wrote blasphemy. We're going to cut off your tongue because you spoke blasphemy. Wow. And we're going to cut off your head. And when they cut off his hands after, but first they burned them.
Wow.
Then they used a red-hot poker on his tongue and his mouth.
Wow.
Then they beheaded him. So it was really
And which
horrific.
time period was this? Of 16th, 17th century or so?
Yes, it was in the 17th century.
Yeah.
And the Kazimierz Wazinski Foundation, the atheist group, wants people to realize who he was and get him some justice, at least now. They want at least there to be a road or street name for him.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the centerpiece of the Days of Atheism event that they kind of worked the rest of the conference around. And I think we have some more photographs. Oh, well, now we're getting really, speaking of grim, Dan and I went to Krakow, and maybe you want to talk about Auschwitz, Dan.
Yeah, so this is the entrance to Auschwitz outside of Krakow. And you can maybe not read that, but it says Arbeit macht frei.
Very famous.
As the prisoners were marched into Auschwitz, they marched under the sign that says work makes you free. So Annie, Laurie, and I took a day to visit the very sobering, very sad site where these crimes, which were committed mostly by Lutherans and Catholics, by the way. Here's the double fence separating the inner from the outer. To see just the horrific human nature of hatred against another religion.
And that's what
this is.
Oh, go ahead.
That's Birkenau. That's 2 miles away. That's the big slave camp at Birkenau, and you can see some of the barracks behind it. And this is part of one of the ovens where they made a decision to send you one way to the ovens or the other way to the slave camp. And so they're retaining some of this history there at Birkenau.
So the Nazis, just a second, we'll go back to Birkenau. The Nazis bombed their own, the evidence of their crimes.
Sure.
So that was the rubble.
And just to add to what Dan was saying, Annie, Laurie, about Lutherans and them being Lutherans and Catholics, there's a book out that I reviewed for The Progressive back about 10 years ago called The Holy Reich, which actually is about the Nazis and Christianity.
Right.
That they had their own, so to speak, idiosyncratic, warped interpretation of Christianity, but they did believe that they were following Christianity in their own way, in carrying out the Holocaust and in their anti-Semitism.
Well, in Mein Kampf, Hitler said he was going to complete what Jesus started and kill Jews for Jesus, basically. And then on the buckle of their belts, the soldiers wore something that said "Gott mit uns," God with us.
Wow.
God was on their side. Of course, it was a religious genocide, and they started off killing Poles there, but it was, I think, 95 or 99% were Jews, and they were trained in from 20 countries.
Wow.
And they showed one of the leftover carts and the horrible conditions of. So many of them died on the way there, but it was a very sobering experience, and I guess that's the kind of thing you're going to process the rest of your life. But a caution for how divisive religion is and how out of control it can become when you have a fascist dictator who's espousing one religion over another.
Certainly. And it was the culmination, as this book, Constantine's Sword, points out, of centuries of anti-Semitism.
Right, and pogroms.
Basically. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of basically it was a very upbeat conference, but you got to take your, the historic harms are there.
Certainly.
But let's end with a light note. We do have a final picture from our sightseeing in Krakow. And Dan, do you want to talk about this dragon?
So there's this castle, south of the center in Krakow. It's called Wawel, W-A-W-E-L. And there's a legend about a dragon that lived down in the bottom of this castle. And if whoever could slay the dragon got to marry the king's daughter. That's the whole thing. And so the story happened. But anyway, there's this sculpture here of the dragon. And every 3 or 4 minutes, it would start spitting out fire from its mouth. You can see it up there.
Nice.
So it's a tourist attraction.
Yeah, nice.
It was fun.
Yeah, so it was a cute kind of little thing. So we bought some little stuffed dragons for the grandkids, just as a memorial of that.
Krakow is, as Nina told us, a gem, and very worth visiting. And but the situation in Poland is a very bad one. It's getting bad here, but there they've actually lost abortion rights. And she actually told me that only about 30% of people there are Catholic, but the Catholic Church is in league with the government. So that's why. And
it's had such a
It started
hold.
with solidarity, and when that turned into a very bad thing for women's rights.
Yes, and John Paul II, of course.
Yes,
was
and
Polish,
yes, and he's very revered. Everywhere you would go, you would be told, oh, he was here or he was there. So, but the Polish atheists are very feisty and very courageous.
That's good to know. Yeah.
And they hold the Days of Atheism every year, and we were very pleased to go there and, like I said, to be honored with the atheist organization.
Yes.
And so do we have some?
Yes, we have questions for our traveling star, Dan. So Jaden Liu asks, how often does Dan travel around? And is it mostly for debates?
Well, last night was debate number 134, which sounds like a lot. It is. At 134 public, moderated, formal debates. I don't count radio shows in that. But the first one I did was 1985, so that's averages about 4 a year. Most of the time I give talks. So I'll be in Iowa next week and in Minneapolis next week giving talks, and in Pittsburgh, where the chair of our executive board, Stephen Hurdle, lives. I'll be talking about mere morality. But I want to say something. I passed an important milestone.
Yes, Dan.
On Monday, I became a 1,000,000 miler with Delta Airlines. So,
incredible.
And that took 31 years to get to. So now I guess I'm somebody.
But you, Dan, you have had an extraordinary run this early spring since January? Trotting around the country. It's been unusual. I mean, do you know how many appearances you've made this spring?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 20 or so.
Yeah.
But I told the crowd last night that we just got back from Poland, so it was a bit of a jet lag doing that debate last night, which was, what is that, 8 hours or 9 hours difference?
Yeah, you're still having some jet lag, so am I.
Still a little bit.
And then as you mentioned earlier, a gratifying part of what you do, traveling around and public speaking, is speaking to young audiences. Very often, if not most often, you're invited by campus groups and speaking on campuses.
Yeah, it's because the Freedom from Religion Foundation has an arrangement with the Secular Student Alliance, which is a organization of many, many different campus groups on college and high school campuses. So if they'll set up the event, like last night, the secular students set up this event, then FFRF gets one of us to it. For debates, it's usually me, but this is a chance for us to reach out to that younger generation, which really is becoming a lot less religious. They don't have a lot of money and a lot of time, so they can't, all of them, join groups. So we offer our essay contests, and we offer free attendance to our conventions, and of course we offer speakers to the events.
It's gone up to $10, Dan.
What is it?
Students have gone back up to $10.
Oh, they have gone up to $10.
But we offer scholarships for travel and rooms.
Yeah, okay, good. So, and that's really exciting. And at a university, there really is a percentage of the audience that is in the middle. they're not all on one side or the other. So you have a chance to actually make a difference.
Yeah,
and
Dan,
then, we can say we're going to be going to Iceland in May.
Nice.
And then I'm going to be going to Amsterdam at the end of August for another, it's a conference on blasphemy.
Nice. So Europe is a frequent travel destination.
Well, this year, I guess, yes. But
nice.
we were in Iceland in 2006, and so it'll be fun to go back, and that's part of the Humanist International group, and also SIDMENT, which is the hosting Icelandic group. And we know people like Hopi, and it would be really fun to have a reunion with the humanists there.
Certainly. So this other question for Dan is a two-parter. The first part deals with his travels to a very different part of the world. So it says, "Hi Dan, do you ever get pushback when you go down to the south?" So if you could first answer that, have you?
You mean like to Honduras and Guatemala?
No, south as in the southern, the U.S. South.
Oh, the U.S. South. Yeah, some people think that's South America. Yes, but no. Usually at these events at a university, everything is cordial and everyone's on good behavior. And so there's pushback in the intellectual sense, but there's never really any hassles. I was picketed once in Kansas. I don't know if you call that the South or not, by the Westboro Baptists. They stood outside the debate with all their signs and that, but no, I've never been to the northwest corner of Alabama, so we'll have to see what it's like.
Yes, I was going to say you're headed back down there. Yes,
you do often tell me that after your debates, some young woman will come up to you and she'll be crying. She's really religious because you're going to go to hell, basically. You do get that kind of response.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know if that's pushback, but it's like the tears in their eyes, and they just can't understand why somebody would differ with them. So, and even last night during the debate, there were questions that were intellectually hostile, but the people themselves were very cordial about it. So,
and then the second part of this question is, and you may have to pause and ponder over this a bit, what's been your most favorite debate you've ever done? That's a difficult one, nah?
So I think as far as the debate goes, I think the one in Oxford.
Oxford,
for the Oxford Union,
in UK.
Oxford, England. Where we dressed up with tuxedos and bow ties, and we had to give a toast to the Queen, and everything was parliamentary procedure.
Wow!
And it was a 3-on-3 debate. Me, Michael Shermer, and Peter Milliken against. Peter Hitchens was Christopher Hitchens' brother. Is an Anglican believer, so he was one of our opponents, and so that was really fun. And at the end of the debate, I think this is why I think it was my favorite. The president of the Oxford Union, this young student he wore a white bow tie to signify that they were like a higher class. He said, "We're going to vote with our feet. Those of you who support the proposition, which means this house believes in God, you will exit through this door. But those of you who support the opposition, which was us, you will exit through this door." So 142 people exited through the proposition door. 162 exited through our door. So by voting with their feet at Oxford University, the atheists won the debate.
Nice, Dan. And this is, as you said, just one of the 134 you have done. So Dan, it's so nice of you to give us the time and spare us some moments from your busy travels. And all the best for your sojourn into the South, the U.S. South soon. I guess Atlanta and then Alabama. And goodbye from us here at the FFRF studio at Free Thought Hall. And next week again, please don't forget to tune in and to see where in the world is Dan Barker. We've given you some clues. And this is Amit Pal, the communication director of...
See you this weekend, Dan.
Communication director of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And with me is Laurie. And it was great doing this show. And see you next Wednesday at the same time on Facebook Live.